pause and reflect. And I picked that because it's something that I know for myself. It's something that's really beneficial. And so partly what I'm offering by sitting up here chatting today is from my own experience. And I have some things I want to share from ancient wisdom, Buddhist background, and also from how it relates a little bit toward modern pragmatic teaching or practice in everyday life, maybe even a touch into modern science. And one of the things that I have found really beneficial is short practices many times. Like I like sitting for a half hour, 45 minutes, and I tend to do that 5 weekdays in the morning. And then, but throughout the day, and oftentimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I think these are really great times for me to do short practices. I also didn't share too much about me, but I also teach mindfulness-based programs, and one is, we give the title Untangling Anxiety. Another one is called Unwinding Anxiety, kind of the same thing. So I know I wake up sometime, I don't teach them here, by the way, in case anybody wondered, but this idea of using short practices many times throughout the day, and that it can incorporate longer practices. But just curious, anybody have challenges throughout their day? Yes. Some that you might just, pause and just pause for a moment and take a few breaths. Anybody give that a try every now and then? And just another question. I see a lot of head shaking. I don't know about folks on Zoom, but there's a lot of head shaking here. That are there times where you might forget to do that? Like just not think about doing that? And the challenges can kind of get carried away by challenges. And so I'm going to be like, I'll say I'm the first in line here because I know I do that. I also know that kind of like in the meditation practice, to know that I'm thinking, to me, is a big practice in my everyday life. So my mind wanders in sitting meditation. The many more years that I've done it, I have periods where it can be calm. And if I do it for a long time, it might even be calm for longer. But I just know that awareness and all kinds of phenomena around me are temporary. So even though I'm somewhat aware most of the time, that it kind of fades in and out. And I'm a filmmaker. Tell you a little bit about me is that my background in Los Angeles for 30 years involved with, first started making television commercials, computer animated, and I was involved with computer graphics research in college, and then there was no computer animation yet at the time. And when it kind of came onto the scene, I was here happily making research, doing commercials, and then into movies and so forth. But the reason why I mention that, the significance is that in filmmaking, we're looking at the past and looking at the future. We're cutting back and forth with shots all the time, like filmmaking. We're also fading in and out. There's the fade in, there's the fade out. Not to expect everybody to know. Because when we're watching, sometimes it's just we're part of this experience, which I think is true of a meditation, everyday life, that there are phenomena that come and go, they rise and they fall. And I see a lot of similarities to what we do in film language. And so connecting with the short practices many times, it's something that my whole day, I don't know about yours, is kind of filled with different shots. There's different things that are happening, things are coming and going. I might be really focused for a while, and other times I'm not so focused. And finding time to just stop and pause is a way to collect, to get grounded, find moments of presence. In particular, it could be a time just to be nourishing, like it's maybe 5 minutes of sitting and following the breath, or just sitting and going outside to feel the breeze, listening to birds if they're around. Right now there's a lot of smells, a lot of really good smells. I don't know about where you live, maybe there's bad smells. I just want to acknowledge that. I know there's people on Zoom that could be on the other side of the world. But this idea that all the senses can bring us into the present, the one thing that takes us away is thinking. So it's all the senses of awareness. And we can think in the present moment as long as we know that we're thinking. And so short practices many times, whether it's to nourish or to work with challenges. And it's something that seems like old, like a folk type of wisdom, an ancient wisdom really, to take a few breaths and relax. And so that's a practice. I'll just share that. One is called STOP. And it's a great acronym if you haven't heard it, because it's easy to remember. It's like, oh, I should stop right now, to pause and reflect. To stop stands for stopping. If you want to try this out, the T stands for take a few breaths. So we take a few breaths. And as we're continuing, we can observe. The O is observing. Oh, what does it feel like to take a breath? What does it feel like now? And then the P is for proceeding. To proceed. Or it also could stand for present. Maybe the present moment. To be present. As opposed to being lost in thought. Or caught in some moment of distraction. So just wanted to offer that. And that within that stop could be a moment of just discerning and reflecting on the breath. And it could be really a challenge, especially for very new people and people who are even experienced beginners or people who consider themselves experienced, that the mind will wander. And so this idea that even within a longer practice, that one breath can be like a short practice. It's like, oh, there's one breath. That felt really good, that one breath. And it could be right after that, my mind will wander, but I had that one breath. Or it could be two breaths, or build upon it. So that even to consider within a longer half-hour practice or 10-minute practice, that each breath can be a short practice. And if we benefit from having even a few breaths where we're at ease and not really lost in the busy mind, that could be really an inspiration to keep going and to continue to practice. So I want to talk a little bit about reflecting. I'm just curious if anybody feels like you make choices that are more kind of like automatic or autopilot. Oh, you're raising your hand. Want to share one? No, if anybody has a good one to share, feel free. But making choices on autopilot, it could be a good one for me is maybe eating when I'm not hungry, but more like stress eating or eating that's out of entertainment. And even if I prepare a really nice meal and I am hungry, like for nourishment, as much as I practice mindful eating, I might notice that especially when I'm like kind of anxious, will eat really fast and just keep scooping and scooping, and it might take me 4 or 5 minutes to eat, which just took me like a half hour to prepare. And so this kind of autopilot, as opposed to stopping and discerning and reflecting on each bite. So this idea of contemplating a little bit. It's like, this is delicious. I'm going to savor. A little bit of savoring could be related to this idea of reflecting, pausing and reflecting, pausing for each bite, like looking at the food, looking at it, smelling it, even if there's sounds that are related to it, and savoring. So this idea of food is such a great experience, a good example to experience pausing and reflecting. And it can take intention, like, for the first 5 minutes of my meal, I'm going to eat mindfully and put my fork or my spoon, or if it's holding by hand, just put the food down and one bite at a time and enjoy it. It can take a really long time to eat this way. That's why I'm saying sometimes it's just have the intention. I'm going to check in at the beginning, maybe on a scale of 0 to 10, like, how hungry am I now? There's some reflecting. Yeah, I am hungry. Or it could be like I feel like eating, so I could reflect on a scale of 0 to 10. How hungry am I right now? It's like, I'm not hungry, but I have this desire. So this could be more like an emotional eating pattern. So just reflecting before eating food. And then if it is hunger, to go ahead and have the meal. I mean, if it is emotional eating and you want to go ahead, that's up to you. But this can be a great way to discern. It's like, oh yeah, I don't really need that. Maybe there's something else I need to do. It could be a way just to pause and reflect and make a choice, as opposed to the autopilot of emotional eating. Or even having seconds. Sometimes like, oh, I think I'll pause and reflect. Do I really need the seconds? I was raised in a family where food was such a big part of our culture, and food is entertainment. I travel to different countries just to go like on food tours, so I will say how fabulous food is. But this idea of pausing and reflecting with food is really a valuable practice for me, and just thought I would share that with you. Because it's real practical every day, and how it can relate to other things in life. The same kind of emotional wanting or automatic feeding can be like news feeds or social media feeds, these things that they call feeds. To go on there, that there's this like hunger to keep going. Oh, that was cool, especially Instagram. Somebody will send me I don't post to Instagram. And I have like 5 photos that have been there for about 12 years. It's like maybe once every 2 years I post. But anyway, somebody will send me a link, and there's the most fantastic thing about like these hummingbirds in slow motion, and I'll just be mesmerized. And I'll see that on a message from like a really dear friend, and then it's like 20 minutes later, and I'll think, how did I get on here? And there's so many amazing things that just go by. It is just autopilot. And then this happened to me recently. It's like, how did I get on there? Like I had to rewind. Like, what was the condition? And it's like, oh yeah, my friend sent me a link to this really cool thing, and I just got lost on there. So autopilot, and then stopping, pausing, reflecting. It could be a great way if this is an issue for anybody, like if it's a lovely thing to do, but it also could be very much like a time-absorbing thing. Just to pause and reflect. I'm just curious, ask this other question. Does anybody make choices after pausing and discerning? Pausing and reflecting. Oh yeah, I can see lots of head shaking. That's good. And there's a lot of good reason to. So I'm really happy to see that. It can be really, extremely beneficial. Of course, everyday things that we do, like if I'm going to buy the gas that's across the street or here, I know I do that very carefully, like which one's more expensive. So, purchasing is a big one. Shopping can be a really big one. Also, can shop on autopilot. It can be really easy to do that as well. But different types of reflecting and discerning, and how that can be more part of a mindful practice. Making beneficial, wholesome choices. I have my list, I made a list, to really see if something is like, and I'll get to this more. I'm going to share a little bit from more examples, but generally a list that I wrote down is to discern, like, is something harmful or not harmful? Is this going to be harmful or not harmful when I'm reflecting? Is my action going to be goodwill or ill will? Is my thought or my action like ill will? Did somebody hurt me and now I want to hurt them back, or can I send them goodwill? It's like, oh, they hurt me, but I'm going to kill them with kindness. So it's a different response. Or friendly versus unfriendly. It's kind of related. Is my activity right now greedy or generous? Is it honest, or is there some kind of like lying involved? Grateful or thankless for something, like no appreciation. And I know I'm capable of all those on both sides. But this is where, conditioning and being human comes in, and reflecting to make skillful choices that are better for ourselves and for others and for the world around us. This could be discerning, like if I'm going to recycle this or not recycle this, or purchases related to environmental health. So there's those interpersonal ones, like recycling, eating, what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to make for my family to eat, speech, what I'm saying, how I'm going to say it, entertainment, if I'm going to, certainly being a big fan of film, to, am I going to binge watch something? Am I going to stop, just like time to go to bed? I'm going to stay up late, binging, reading the news. So this kind of discernment, with this personal, could be related to spiritual, to the elections, to charity, to activism, how it connects with others, and then just very personally, like my own thoughts. And I kind of touched on that, my own emotions. This could relate to anybody, or anyone's personal sensations, mental ruminations. Is it possible to stop? And we learn this from perhaps doing quiet sitting meditation, that we can start to see, oh, my mind is ruminating. Can we do that in everyday life? And are these thoughts really beneficial or not beneficial? And for me, a practice with rumination is to pause. It's like, oh yeah, this actually is stressful. I'm adding stress to my life. And can this be something where I just step out of being caught or captured in it? Anybody get captured in thinking or rumination? So, and can it be stressful? So just to see it, like, oh, I see it, there it is. I know that I'm ruminating, just like in practice. It's like, oh, there's thinking. I know that I'm thinking. So that can be part of bringing discernment into everyday life. There's a quote that I know I want to read from, anyway, it comes from Ajahn Chah's, to know, really to look at your discernment, to look at your own thinking and to know your own mind, to begin to really investigate your own thinking and to know your own mind, and to know your own intentions, to know your mind, to know your intentions. And this can take time as a practice to really investigate. There's my thinking. What are my intentions here? And to do a discernment by noticing, like, and I mentioned a list of items. Is this harmful or not harmful? Is this beneficial or not beneficial? Is it healthy or not healthy? And so he has this other quote that I do have here, to investigate it, to really investigate, and that nobody can do this for us. So he says, you must try tasting the fruit for yourself, so that we can really investigate our thoughts, our sensations, our intentions. And so a little bit of reference to Buddhist practice, a little bit more reference to that. I wanted to bring up the instructions for meditation from the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and just not expecting everybody to know what that is. It's mainly, it could take quite a long time, so I hear myself saying, oh, how am I going to get through this, Robert? This idea of knowing, like an essence of to know that you're breathing, to know that you're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. It's this idea coming from the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, within the first few sentences, is to know that you're breathing. To simply know. And the opposite of knowing is not knowing. It's kind of being drifted, that state of being drifted. So meditation is like a state of knowing and a state of kind of not knowing. And how that can be so valuable in our lives. It's not just these 4 postures, sitting, standing, walking, and lying down, but to know we're breathing, to know that we're hearing. And then they literally attribute it to the Buddha. There's a full list of when you're going to the restroom, knowing when you're doing every activity. This idea of knowing, complete knowing and awareness of all of our activities. And it's very, very, very much emphasizes body awareness. Many teachers refer to the incredible amount of what they call embodiment, to be cultivating the sense of being present with our body, that we can turn to our body as a way to really feel present, because it is. Every one of our senses in our body is in the present moment. And that could, the part that seems to go away is the thinking, the past and future thinking. And so wanted to refer to the Satipatthana Sutta because it has so much about discerning, to discern whether we're breathing, to discern whether we're sitting, standing, or lying down, as I mentioned. And it's something that, whether you know about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is typically a part of many, many guided meditations, and something that we could bring into our everyday life. Just to know, like that pause, to stop, to take a breath, to observe, and to know like what's happening right now. There's a great, for me, a very inspirational teaching from the Buddha, and it's a sutta where he's teaching his son Rahula, when, according to the notes and the translator, Rahula, his son was 7 years old, and the Buddha was teaching him, and I did want to read a little bit about this. It's really a teaching on reflecting. And I don't really know the circumstances, but little Rahula must have done something where he lied, and he was in big trouble. That's what it seemed like. And so the Buddha, who was actually his father, said to him, Rahula, when anyone feels no shame in telling a deliberate lie, there is no evil, I tell you, that he won't do. So the Buddha really didn't like lying. He thought anybody who lied could do evil, according to this translation. Thus, Rahula, you should train yourself. I will not tell a deliberate lie, even in joking. That lying was a big thing he didn't want anybody to do. And then he goes right on to say, what do you think, Rahula? What is a mirror for? He asked him, what's a mirror for? And his answer, Rahula's answer, was for reflection, to reflect. And then the Buddha went on to say, yes, in the same way, Rahula, body actions, verbal actions, and mental actions are to be done with repeated reflection. And so I talked about it a little bit, but here, like Ajahn Chah, he really gets into this whole idea that we can reflect on everything. And so he's saying that we can reflect on our bodily actions, our verbal actions, our mental actions, and to continue to repeat reflection. And so I highlighted bodily action and verbal action and mental action. And so there's 3 states that he wants us and people to reflect on, Rahula. So I'm going to do it full justice and read it. So if you're wanting to do something, you haven't done it yet, you're wanting, which is really normal to want. I want to do this. Whenever you want to do a bodily action, you should reflect on it. The bodily action I want to do, would it lead to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or both? Would it be an unskillful bodily action, with painful consequences, painful results? If on reflection you know that it would lead to self-affliction, to afflictions of others, or to both, it would be unskillful to do these things. And then he repeats, unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results, then any bodily action of that sort is absolutely unfit for you to do. But if on reflection you know that it will not be afflicting, and that it will be skillful, with pleasant consequences, pleasant results, then any bodily action of that sort is fit for you to do. I mean, there's a lot of words here. It's basically, is this something that is going to hurt you and others in the world before you do it? And if it isn't, if it's skillful, to go ahead and do it. It's kind of common sense, very practical. But it's something that he goes on to say, while you're doing a bodily action, you should, while you're doing it, so now we're doing it, that we should reflect on it. And this bodily action, is it leading to self-affliction? Is it leading to affliction to others, or to both? Is it an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? And if on reflection you know that it's leading to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or both, you should give it up. But if on reflection you know that it's not, you can continue it. So he goes on, so it's before, it's during, and it's after. And he repeats the same thing. That we can reflect on something before we do any action, while we're doing it, and then afterwards. And then I said there were 3 categories that he mentioned. That's for bodily, verbal, and mental actions. And so he goes on to repeat that for all 3. And just very abbreviated, for the verbal actions, he says, whenever you want to do a verbal action, you should reflect on it. And this is like wise speech, speaking wisely. It's non-harming. While you're doing a verbal action, you should reflect on it. And having done the verbal action, you should reflect on it. And he lists all those parameters to be non-harming versus, beneficial. And then he talks about mental actions. Whenever you want to do a mental action, you should reflect on it. While you're doing a mental action, you should reflect on it. And having done, you should reflect on it. So there's a lot of reflecting. And it's something to consider. In a reasonable amount, that's where I come back to like short practices many times per day. And one for myself that I find very beneficial, something that I teach in my classes and was taught to me, is if I notice that I am ruminating and it's not beneficial. And so the question I ask, it's a question, is it's my reflection, am I reviewing and regretting? And that can feel very stressful, to review and regret. And is it possible? And it can also feel very constrictive. It can be very caught up, like almost like I feel like I'm boxed in, or like inside a closet or something really tight, very anxious. And then the opposite is it possible that I could look and learn from whatever the situation is? If it's ruminating about something, can I look and learn, which is more of an opening and expansive? It's still thinking, it's still discerning, but it's like, oh, what can I look and learn from this situation? If I had there's a term I learned from cultivating emotional well-being. Is there an emotional regrettable event? Like, is there something that I've regretted that I have done, like maybe in an argument, that I have actually done a regrettable event? And I could be ruminating about that for a very long time, that maybe I had an argument and I didn't get along with somebody. And so instead of reviewing and regretting, is it possible to look and learn? Is there something I can learn from myself, I can learn from others, that I would not be causing the same kind of behavior in the future? It's all very pragmatic, and something that, for me, this idea of closed and reviewing and regretting and opening to looking and learning is something that's become a mantra and a short practice that I wanted to share today. Also to share some other like everyday types of practices, just noticing that there might be a behavior that's happening. Just to even notice it, like, oh yeah, this seems like a little bit unhealthy or harmful for myself. Whether it's, like I mentioned, like emotional eating or ruminating or being on the internet for too long. And noticing that, the second thing would be I'm aware, I'm no longer lost in it. That in itself is kind of shifting out of it in a mindful way. Like, I'm no longer in the behavior. The second is to do this kind of question. So there's like a part 2 to ask, is this helpful or harmful? Is it beneficial or not beneficial? Is it wholesome or unwholesome? Some kind of question like that. And then the third is, well, yeah, I can see that this isn't helpful. So the third step is like, I'm going to use my best mindful energy to step away to do something else. So it's like a 3-step type of reflection. To see it, to discern, and to ask a question, and then to see if it's possible to step away. And if it's not, sometimes, let's say, I might just jump right back in the behavior. It could be the next time I'll step out of it. So this idea of seeing that there are habits of thinking, habits of action that can be like slowly to move away from by doing this kind of reflection practices. Some other types of practice that are everyday, some people do journaling. They do a journal, to write it down instead of like sit and do a silent meditation, is to put it into writing, to actually pause and stop and do a little journaling. Another practice that can be a great way to just collect and is a simple practice of gratitude. Just even saying 3 things that I'm grateful for. 3 things like, oh, I'm feeling grateful for this in this moment can be a way to develop presence and be very healing in many situations.